In this video series, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about Excel. This series is intended for the complete Excel beginner. We're going to walk through the basics of opening an Excel file, we're going to learn how to navigate an Excel worksheet or workbook, and then go through some of the most common formulas in Excel. Let's get into it. To open Excel, you have a few different options. The first option is to hit the Windows button in the bottom left and search for the Excel icon. Click the icon and it will open a pane that allows you to start a blank workbook or open a file that you were previously working on. The second option is to double-click the Excel icon on your desktop. This will give you the same blank workbook and existing file options. If you already have Excel open, a third option is to click the File button on the menu bar, and on the Home tab on the sidebar, you'll see the same choices that we saw with options 1 and 2. Through one of the three options that we just discussed to open a file, you will see this window. Let's click on Blank Workbook. Now, what are we looking at? The tab on the bottom labeled Sheet 1 is called a worksheet. If I click the plus button next to Sheet 1, a new tab will be added called Sheet 2. The combination of any number of sheets is called a workbook. When you hear people refer to Excel files in general, they're usually talking about workbooks or the entire collection of sheets. Within a worksheet, all the tiny white boxes are called cells. A worksheet can contain over 17 billion cells. Each cell's location is referenced by the combination of its column letter and row number. Columns are the letters that you see running horizontally across the screen. If I select a letter, it highlights the whole column. Rows are the numbers running vertically down the screen. If I select a number, the whole row is highlighted. If we go back to what a cell is, it is simply the intersection between a column and a row. This is cell F14, this is cell B17, and this is I10. If you selected all the cells between B5 and I10, this is called a range of cells and would be referred to with the name of the first cell, B5, followed by a colon and then the name of the second cell, I10. If you're talking to someone about the range, you would say B5 through I10. Within these cells, you can put different types of data, text, numbers, dates, and with this data, you can perform different actions or formulas on them. You can add, subtract, multiply, divide, combine, or pretty much do anything you can think of with this data. Now, if you can do anything you want with any cell of data, within any cell of data, then you can only imagine how powerful Excel is. Now that we've gone through the basics, let's walk through some of the different tabs on the Excel ribbon to get a better idea of what features Excel has. Let's start with the Home tab. The Home tab is the most used since it has basic font, alignment, and number formatting options. It also gives options for conditional formatting, which allows for changes to formatting based on rules you create. The Home tab also has table manipulation and styling options. Let's look at a few examples of what each section does. In the font section, we could write a word in a cell, flood fill it yellow, and change the font color to blue. We could then use the border options to give the cell a thick border all the way around. Using the alignment section, we could align our text to the middle of the cell vertically, but move the text to the right side of the cell horizontally. If we write too much in the cell, we can use wrap text to show everything. If we change the cell contents to a number, we could switch the cell format to accounting and remove the decimal places. This would give us a sleek currency format. If we wanted the text to be a different color, if the number in the cell was greater than 20, we could click on Conditional Formatting, highlight Cells Rules, Greater Than, and enter 20. Now if we enter 30, the cell background and font will change to red. The next tab is the Insert tab. The main use of this tab is either for inserting tables or pivot tables and adding charts or graphs. Both tables and visualizations are larger topics that I will cover in future videos. Let's skip over these for now and move on to the Page Layout tab. The Page Layout tab had a lot of useful features when companies printed analyses or other files, but since the world has moved almost completely digital, this tab isn't used as much. The only section that I'll call out here is the Themes section. This section allows you to choose a theme or color scheme for your workbook. In cases where you'd like to use your company's or your personal color scheme, you'd select Browse for Themes and select the theme file. Let's move on to the Data tab. The Formulas tab will be covered later in this video when we walk through some of the most commonly used formulas in Excel. The Data tab has a lot of advanced tools, but it also has one of the most common sections, Sort and Filter, and another extremely useful section, Data Tools. In this example, we have a table with 4 different columns: company, number of employees, revenue, and CAGR. If we just wanted to compare two of the customers, we'd have to highlight both lines and look back and forth. This approach is not efficient. Instead of highlighting both lines, we can simply apply filters. If you have a continuous data set, meaning there are no blank rows in your data, you can highlight the header rows and click on the filter button. If your data set has blanks, highlight the whole data set, including the headers, and then hit the filter button. This will allow you to filter all the data, including anything beyond blank rows. Once we have applied filters to the data, we can easily compare two customers without the noise of the rest of the data. There are a few shortcuts that I'd like to mention here. To clear the filters that you've applied to the data, you would usually click on the header that you filtered and select Clear. Or if you have multiple filters applied in different columns, you would go to the Sort and Filter tab and click Clear there. The best option that I've found is to go to the Sort and Filter tab, right-click on the Clear button, and select Add to Quick Access Toolbar. You'll now see the Clear Filters icon on the top right of your Excel window, which is the Quick Access Toolbar. To access this, first hit Alt, which brings up a list of number shortcuts that you can use to select items from the Quick Access Toolbar. Then you can hit the corresponding number and all filters are cleared. This is extremely helpful when you have complex models where 10 or more columns are filtered and you just want to clear everything and start over. You would simply just hit Alt and the number that corresponds to clear the filters. I personally like putting clear filters in the number 1 position. The next shortcut that I want to mention is to apply filters, Ctrl-Shift-L. Instead of going to the Sort and Filter section to apply filters, just use Ctrl-Shift and L after you've either selected the headers or the whole data set. Let's move on to the Data Tools section. The Data Tools section has two extremely useful functions, text to columns and remove duplicates. If we have a column of data that is separated by a delimiter, in this case a semicolon, we can use text to columns to make two separate columns. Highlight the column of data and hit the Text to Columns button. In this window, we'll choose Delimited because our data is separated by a semicolon. We can then hit Next. In this screen, we'll choose Semicolon and hit Next again and then click Finish. Now we have two separate columns of data. Let's look at a similar data set as we did with text to columns. In this case, it looks like our data set has a lot of repeated cells. If we hit the Remove Duplicates button and hit OK, we are left with unique values. Both text to columns and the Remove Duplicates functions are extremely useful tools. Don't forget to check them out when you're working with large data sets in Excel. Alright, let's move on to the Review tab. The Review tab has one main feature that I'll call out. In the Protect section, Excel gives you functions to be able to lock down your worksheet or workbook. If this protection is set, the user won't be able to change the contents of a cell without giving the unlock password. This is usually something that larger companies try to use to keep their data safe. One very important call out here. There are several ways to break or remove the password that are widely known at this point in Excel's life. I would suggest not adding extremely sensitive data to your Excel sheets. Even a beginner Googler could figure out how to remove the sheet's password, so you're better off not adding the data in the first place. Let's move on to the View tab. The most important feature of the View tab is the Freeze Panes button. This is usually used to either freeze the top row so that when you scroll, you can still see the column headers, or it's used to freeze both the top row and the first column, which is mostly used when you want to see the column headers, but also the row titles or labels. Now that you understand the basics of Excel and can navigate through the different tabs of features that Excel has, let's walk through the most useful, formulas. So what are formulas? Formulas are useful tools that have been coded into Excel to jumpstart your efficiency in Excel. These tools range from allowing you to easily merge two Excel files to helping you with complex statistical calculations. Chances are there's a formula that can help you in some way. Let's walk through some of the most common and most useful formulas in Excel. The XLOOKUP is part of a group of formulas called the lookup and reference formulas. The main lookup formulas XLOOKUP, VLOOKUP, and HLOOKUP allow you to merge multiple files of data if a common data column is present in all. Having multiple files from many different systems being used independently is how many companies operate. The lookup formulas give you a way to allow the data to be merged and to work together. Let's look at an example of the most powerful and newest lookup formula, the XLOOKUP. In this example, we have a lookup table and a working table. In the lookup table, we have a list of customers and their corresponding regions. In the working table, we have a list of customers, but we are missing the customer region. We can use the XLOOKUP to bring in the region from the lookup table into the working table. Every formula in Excel starts with the equals key. If data entered into a cell doesn't start with the equals key, Excel will treat the field as text or numerical data. For the XLOOKUP, we'll start with the equals key and then enter the XLOOKUP formula. As you type the formula name, Excel will begin suggesting formulas. You can use the arrow keys to highlight the formula that you're looking for, and then the tab key to finish the autocomplete and start the formula. This is extremely helpful later on when you need to do formulas quickly or you are building complex models that require multiple nested formulas. The XLOOKUP takes a few different arguments. Arguments are basically just different pieces of data that the formula needs in order to work properly. The lookup value. The first argument is the lookup value. This is the value that's common between the working table and the lookup table. In order for cells to be common, the data has to be exactly the same. This means that if there's a space, a comma, or any other slight variation in the lookup value between the two tables, the formula won't work properly. In this case, the lookup value will be B11, the customer. Lookup array. This is the column of data in the lookup table that contains the lookup value from the working table. Just like the lookup value, the data in the lookup array must exactly match the cell that you use for the lookup value in the working table. In this case, the lookup array will be B4 through B7. Once we've entered the range B4 through B7, we must lock the range in place. You can either lock the range by inputting $signs in front of the letter and the number in each cell within the range, or you can highlight the whole range and hit the F4 shortcut. So what does locking the range do? When you copy a cell's formula to another cell, Control-C and then Control-V, Excel adjusts the range of every cell in your formula based on however many cells you pasted away from the originally copied formula. For example, F10 has the number 1 entered into it. If you put a formula in F11 that says F10 plus 1, the answer will be 2. Now, if we copy cell F11, Control-C, and then paste in F12, Control-V, and then we look at the contents of the F12 formula, you'll notice that the F10 in our original formula changed to F11. This is because Excel is trying to make our formulas dynamic. Now, if we go back to F11, highlight F10 in the formula, hit F4 to lock it, and now copy that formula to F12, the cell keeps the reference to F10. Return array. Next is the return array. This is the column of data in the lookup table that contains the data that you want. Unlike the lookup value and lookup array, this data doesn't have to match anything. This is the data that you're returning because you were able to find a match with the lookup value and lookup array. In this case, the return array will be C4 through C7. If not found. This is an optional argument that allows you to set a default return value if there's an error. This is useful in cases where you want to zero out errors or you want to display a message like error, please check if the formula isn't working properly. In this case, we'll leave the if not found argument blank as there shouldn't be any errors. Match mode. This is another optional argument that defines the way to match the lookup value with values in the lookup array. This has a variety of different options that we'll explore further in another video. For our example, we'll leave this blank. Hit enter and copy the formula down to the other cells. Perfect, the customer region is pulling in correctly. Let's take a look at another core formula, the if statement. Along with the lookup formulas, the if statement is a core formula that every Excel user should know. The if statement is a logical formula that allows you to change the output of a cell based on whether a condition that you create is met. In this example, we have a list of customers and the sales dollars they achieved in 2022. We'd like to give a 5% rebate to customers with over $2 million in sales. We can use the if statement to do this. The if statement starts with a logical test. Is the data in cell C4 greater than 2 million? The next is value if true. If cell C4 is greater than 2 million, what do we want to return? We'd like to return 5%. Now the formula wants the value if false. If cell C4 is less than or equal to 2 million, what do we want to return? In this case, we'd like to return 0. Let's copy the formula down and see if it worked. It looks like it did. Awesome. Let's take a look at another core formula. A lot of Excel users may say that the sum or count formulas would be the most popular, but in the data analytics world, the subtotal formula is far more useful. The subtotal formula not only allows you to summarize and count data along with 9 other useful functions, it lets you do that on filtered data. Let's jump into an example to see how this works. In this example, we have a table of each customer's sales, cost, and margin data. As we filter to different customers or customer combinations, we'd like to see the subtotal of those filter selections. We can use the subtotal formula for this. The subtotal formula starts with the function number. Like I mentioned in the introduction, the subtotal formula gives you access to 11 different functions. In this example, we'll use number 9 for sum. The next argument is simply the range that you wish to sum. Now, if you're going to use the subtotal formula for dynamic filter updates, you want to select the whole column data range. This allows the subtotal to change based on what is filtered. Just to illustrate the difference between the subtotal and sum, I've added the sum formula above subtotal. Let's test it out. If we filter to just customer D, we should see $826,861 in sales. Perfect. That's exactly what we see, but it looks like the sum formula shows something different. The sum formula is showing the total sales for the whole column, instead of just the sales for the line that we filter to. This is the advantage of the subtotal formula. Now that you know the basics of cells, rows, and columns, how a spreadsheet is laid out, and the basic formulas that Excel has to offer, you should be in a great position to use Excel as an amplifier in your field. If you have any questions or need any help, leave a comment below and I'll try to help out. Thank you for watching.